Warning, this video may upset you. But hey, at least it's not another dish in the sink. If you're a single mom doing everything you can and still feel behind financially, the problem may not be that you're not trying hard enough to overcome your financial obligations. You're likely doing all the right things the personal finance gurus tell you to do. Step 1. Stop being poor. Step 2. Have you tried just having more money? Brilliant advice from people whose biggest financial crisis was choosing between the Porsche and the Tesla. You're working full-time, maybe more than full-time, and you're clipping coupons, meal planning, saying no to your kids more than you want to. Yet at the end of every month, you're still barely hanging on. So here's what nobody's telling you. You're not failing at budgeting. You're surviving a system that was never designed for you to win. What you're experiencing has a name. It's called economic abuse. And today, we're going to break down how it works, why single mothers are hit hardest, and the concrete steps you can start taking right now to stop bleeding money and start building real financial leverage. Here's what economic abuse actually means, because it's not a term most people are familiar with. Economic abuse isn't about someone stealing your credit card or forging your signature. It's not always interpersonal, though it certainly can be in abusive relationships. We're talking about systemic, legal, structural harm, the kind that happens through policies, institutions, and economic structures that consistently punish single-parent households, again, most of which are headed by women. This exploitation and abuse that shows up in spreadsheets and policy documents. It's written into tax codes and employment benefits packages. It's embedded in housing applications and credit scoring algorithms. And because it's legal and institutional, society has been trained not to call it what it is. Think about it this way. When the cost of childcare exceeds what you can earn at work, but you need to work to access healthcare, and you need healthcare to keep working, that's not a personal budgeting failure. That's a trap. A legal, socially acceptable trap that millions of single parents are caught in right now, most of which are mothers. The reason traditional budgeting advice falls flat for single mothers isn't always because you're bad with money, though some of you may in fact be bad with money. It's because that advice assumes you're operating in a system with built-in advantages that you simply don't have. When financial experts say, just cut your spending, or just earn more, they're talking to people who have access to free childcare through a partner, shared housing costs, dual incomes, employer benefits that cover their whole family, and time, actual discretionary time to optimize their finances. You don't have those things, and that's not your fault. That's the system working exactly as it was designed. Let me break down the 5 major structural systems that create economic abuse against single mothers. These aren't random obstacles. They're interconnected, mutually reinforcing traps. Number 1. The childcare cost trap. The average cost of childcare in the United States can range from $10,000 to over $20,000 per year per child, depending on where you live. For many single mothers, that's more than they can earn in a year, especially if they're working entry-level or service industry jobs. So here's the impossible math. You need to work to afford childcare, but childcare costs more than you make working. You might think, well, just work more hours. But daycare centers typically close around 6 p.m. They charge late fees that can equal an hour's wages for being 10 minutes late. They don't open on weekends. They close on holidays when you still have to work. This isn't a budgeting problem. This is an economic structure designed around the assumption that every household has an unpaid caregiver at home. Number 2. Tax policies and benefits cliffs. Here's where it gets really insidious. Government assistance programs, things like childcare subsidies, housing assistance, Medicaid, SNAP benefits, they're often designed with sharp cutoff points based on income. This creates what's called a benefits cliff. You might be making $32,000 a year and receiving $8,000 worth of benefits that allow you to survive. Then you get a raise or a better job opportunity that bumps you to $35,000. Suddenly, you lose all your benefits. Your actual financial situation just got worse, even though you're earning more. The system punishes you for trying to climb out. And then society looks at you and says, "Why don't these people just work harder?" But you are working harder. The system just keeps moving the finish line. Number 3. Healthcare that's tied to employment. Most developed countries have figured out that tying healthcare to employment is cruel and inefficient. We haven't, and for interesting reasons. One being that insurance companies are the largest lobbying forces in the capital, spending hundreds of millions every year on both sides of the aisle. It's also worth noting that former regulators often end up working for insurance companies later, and vice versa. For single mothers, these intentionally dense yet complex policy structures create another impossible bind. You might be able to cobble together income through multiple part-time jobs, gig work, or freelancing, work that gives you the flexibility you desperately need as a solo parent. But none of those jobs offer health insurance, so you're forced to take a traditional full-time job you might not want, that might pay less overall, that might have a terrible schedule for your family, just to access healthcare. And if you lose that job, you lose healthcare for yourself and your children immediately, right when you can least afford to pay out of pocket. This isn't a choice. It's coercion dressed up as employment benefits. Number 4. Housing rules and credit scoring. The housing market punishes single-income households in ways that are almost comedically cruel if they weren't so devastating. Landlords want you to earn 3 times the monthly rent. That means a $1,200 apartment requires you to make $3,600 per month, or about $43,000 a year. But if you're making $43,000 a year as a single mother, you probably can't afford $1,200 in rent after taxes, childcare, healthcare, food, and transportation. And credit scoring? The algorithms assume financial stability looks like consistent dual income, low credit utilization, and the ability to maintain multiple lines of credit. They don't account for medical debt from childbirth, the credit damage from a divorce, or the reality of living paycheck to paycheck, which most Americans do. Which means your income barely covers survival. When you're denied housing or charged higher deposits because of your credit score, that's not the market working efficiently. That's structural discrimination against single mothers coded into an algorithm. Number 5. Time poverty and unpaid labor. Here's the fact that the government doesn't want to call out. You are doing 2 full-time jobs. You're doing the paid labor force job, and you're doing all the unpaid labor of running a household and raising children. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, homework help, doctor's appointments, school meetings, emotional labor, mental load, schedule coordination. This is work, real work. Work that in dual-parent households is often shared or outsourced. Work that married families can divide. You can't divide it. You're doing it all, and you're doing it on less money, less sleep, and less support than households with 2 adults. Time poverty means you can't take the night class that might lead to a promotion. You can't drive across town for the cheaper grocery store. You can't wait on hold for an hour to dispute a medical bill. You can't optimize every financial decision because optimization requires time you don't have. When people say, "just work smarter," they're ignoring that your time is already 100% accounted for, and most of it is spent on survival tasks you cannot eliminate. So if all of this is true, and it is, why doesn't everyone see it? Because our society is deeply invested in the myth of meritocracy. People want to believe that hard work leads to success, that poverty is a personal failing, and that if you're struggling, it absolutely must be because you made bad choices. This belief is comforting to people who aren't struggling. It allows them to feel like their success is entirely earned and their position is secure. If they can convince themselves that struggling single mothers just need to budget better or make smarter choices, they never have to confront the uncomfortable truth that the system is rigged. Single mothers are expected to struggle quietly. You're supposed to figure it out without complaint. When you do speak up, you're labeled as bitter, entitled, or playing the victim. The narrative is always about your personal responsibility, never about systemic failure. This is by design. When we individualize poverty, we never have to address policy. When we frame financial struggle as personal failure for a specific group, we never have to fix the structures creating that struggle. The invisibility is the point. Economic abuse works best when its victims believe they're the problem. Now, let's talk about 3 things you can actually control, without falling into the trap of constantly turning your wheels in a rigged game. First, think strategically about income versus expense decisions. Not all income is worth pursuing if it costs you your benefits, your time, or your sanity. Sometimes, staying just below a benefits cliff is the financially smarter choice, even though it feels wrong. Sometimes, turning down extra hours makes sense if childcare costs eat the entire increase. Run the actual numbers. Include the true cost of working, including transportation, childcare, taxes, lost benefits, and your time. Make decisions based on your real situation, not on what conventional wisdom says you should do. Second, know when not to pay certain debts aggressively. The debt-free community will hate me for this, but here's the truth. If you're choosing between building an emergency fund and aggressively paying down low-interest debt, build the emergency fund first. You need a buffer more than you need to be debt-free. Medical bills, old credit cards, even student loans. If the interest is relatively low and you're meeting minimum payments, it is okay to prioritize your immediate stability over optimal debt payoff strategies. Those strategies are designed for people with safety nets. You need to build your own safety net first. And third, create solid money buffers before investing. The personal finance world loves to talk about investing early and often. And yes, compound interest is real. But you know what else is real? Not being able to cover an emergency because you put every spare dollar into a retirement account you can't access for 30 years. Don't be swayed to believe you're being left behind by ads and content on crypto, penny trading, or market crashes. Your first financial priority is daily survival. That means $2,000 in a savings account is worth more to you right now than $2,000 in an IRA. It means keeping some money liquid even if it's not growing optimally. It means prioritizing flexibility and access over maximum returns. You can always invest later. Right now, you need cash you can actually use when your car breaks down, or your child gets sick, or an unexpected job loss. Okay, so now that you understand what you're up against, let's talk more about what you can do about it. In the next video, we break down the 5 financial must-dos for single mothers making under $75,000. These are the specific, strategic moves that actually work when you're dealing with these structural barriers we just talked about. No generic advice. No, just save more nonsense. Just practical moves you can start this week. So be sure to subscribe to our channel for daily tips on building financial stability on one income. And please give us a like so YouTube shows it to women who may need it.